Have you ever been in a situation where your sixth sense went nuts? You were overwhelmed by this energy within your body and got a strong feeling that you should not go to a certain place. You should not be there. You should leave. You should not talk to that person. And later on found out that you were right. You just avoided death or a really crazy, dangerous situation. As today, we're going to read some experiences of people. My partner and I headed to the pizza for dinner. Halfway there, I had this overwhelming feeling of dread. So bad I couldn't breathe. I told him we needed to go home, and we did. A few hours later, we saw on the news that the pizza restaurant had someone walk in and shoot up the place. My friend and I randomly met a stranger back about 10 years ago. She is, or was, an overly trusting person. And me, not so much. The guy was handsome, clean cut, and from out of town. I instantly pulled my friend to my side and said I have a bad feeling about him. Let's continue on our way and act like we never met him. She liked the looks of him, and wanted to get to know him. I protested, but she let him in the car. I stayed in the car with my friend because I was very put off by this man and I felt unsafe. I didn't want to leave her alone with him. At one point, he asked if we had a blanket in the car, and I said, "Why?" He said so we can pull over on the country road and I can do something with both of you. At that point, I said, "Take me home, now." I also warned her to go home once you drop me off. She didn't listen to me. That's what I found out later. He assaulted her and bit chunks out of her. We later found out when she reported him that he had just murdered his own 2-year-old son and his baby mom 2 days before we met him. He's in prison to this day. When I was younger, we lived in a house that backed up to the golf course in the foothills. During the winter, the golf course was the best place to go sledding. My siblings and I were up sledding one day, and I had just slid down the hill when I was hit with the most dark, sinking feeling I have ever experienced. So much that I couldn't move. I just stood frozen at the bottom of the hill and thought, "You need to leave. You need to leave now," was screaming in my head over and over. My siblings kept asking me what was wrong, and I finally managed to say that I had this really bad feeling and we needed to leave. We all stood motionless, looking at each other for about 5 seconds. And then all at the same time, we took off sprinting across the golf course towards our house. When we got to the gate at our back fence, we looked back across the golf course and saw 2 people standing on the top of the hill where we had just been sledding watching us. We scrambled through the gate, locked it behind us, and we were all so freaked out that we didn't go sledding on the golf course again that winter. It still freaks me out just thinking about it. When I was 6, my family rented a small trailer to go on a trip to California. The trailer had one back door that was wider than a regular door. The hinges were on the left side of the trailer for the door. We were coming through the Neffy, right at the area of the mass murders. Found it out later. We had a truck with a bench seat in the front, and I was sitting between my mom and dad. My dad was driving. All of a sudden, my dad stared into his side mirror and started to panic. He told my mom to look into the mirror. Quick. I looked with her, and the back door to the trailer was swinging in the impossible way. It was swinging open and shut off of the hinges. Completely impossible. My mom told him to pull over, so we stopped off the I-15. And we all 3 got out of the truck. We walked to the back of the trailer and my dad was opening the shutting door trying to explain what we saw. It was fine. The hinges were attached and we couldn't explain it. All of a sudden, this Oldsmobile car pulls off about 50 feet behind us. These 3 large men get out of the car. We watched 2 of the men go to the trunk and inspect it like they had something strange going on too. The 3rd guy walked in front of the car while this was happening. I looked at him staring at us, and the feeling I got from his stare was absolute feelings of needing to run right away. His eyes were dark. The other guy started to walk towards the front too. My parents must have felt the same because all of a sudden my dad says in a tone I have never heard, "Get in the goddamn truck now." As he was saying that, my mom was already pulling me into the truck. My dad was frantic getting in and trying to start up the truck. All I remember is how terrified I was watching the guys approach the truck and get closer as my dad was frantically trying to start the truck. We finally took off as they were approaching the trailer, and I was so scared I had my face in my mother's lap. Then I hear my dad say, "Where the hell did the car go? They vanished, just disappeared. The road is a long stretch. We would have seen their taillights in the other direction, sitting on the other side of the road or driving behind us." I was hiking through the woods alone. Everything was good, the birds were chirping, and then, what seemed like all of a sudden, everything felt unnaturally quiet. I stopped dead and just looked around and listened for anything like a bear or a cougar. I didn't hear or see any predators, and I'm aware this can happen with big cats. And then, I had a terrible feeling of being watched, hunted even. I started walking backwards, slowly, and I swear at a certain point everything went back to normal, and I felt safe to turn my back. The wildlife sounds came back and it even seemed to be warmer. It still freaks me out when I think of it. It's almost like I had wandered into some different realm or something. I don't know, it felt very much like unwelcome and in danger. My brother and I were kids playing hide and seek in the front yard of the house. My brother was 3 and I was 6. My brother was supposed to be counting and finding me, but he was taking forever, so I peeked around the side of the house to see what was taking so long. He had lost interest in the game and was standing near the front of the gate, which led to the street. As I'm looking, I see a brown car pull up with 2 men inside. The car wasn't familiar, and neither were the men. They both got out of the car and approached my brother. They started asking him questions and moving closer to him. I remember feeling panicked. I had learned about stranger danger in school and knew this wasn't right. I ran around the side of the house, flew through the back door and screamed, "Someone is trying to kidnap Steve." My dad didn't hesitate. He got up and flew through the front door. When the men saw my dad coming through the door, they bolted and peeled out. From that day forward, we weren't allowed to play in the front yard anymore. We were learning about stranger danger in school, and my father was in law enforcement, so we were all warned. One day in 1970s, I was walking back home from school, and a car stopped to try to lure me in. It circled the block a few times, and I refused. As a kid, I thought my dad was testing me, so when I got home, I said to him, "Did I pass the test?" He looked at me strangely. I told him the people he hired to try to lure me into the car weren't successful, and he couldn't fool me. He turned white as a sheet and had me describe the car and the details of what happened a few times. And it drove me and my sisters to school every day after that incident. When my dad was in his 20s, he was on a trip to the beach with his friends, but he only had one car. Last day, they all piled up in a car to drive home, but Dad got a weird feeling and decided to stay longer and get the bus back, even though it meant that his mom would be super mad at him as she had some work for him to do. The car made it all the way back to their hometown and was T-boned in an intersection in the main street. All 4 of his friends in the car died.